Howdy, and welcome to Here's the Story, a show that brings student affairs to life by sharing the authentic voices and lived experiences of those who are shaping the field every day. My name is Neil Galimo, and I am the luckiest guy I know. I'm blessed to serve as the Director of Campus Living and Learning on Texas A&M University's sunny Galveston Island campus. I'm a father, a husband, and a son over here just trying to do my best to do a little good or get caught trying. Today, I want to thank to our sponsor, Evolve. Evolve is a series of leadership coaching journeys designed to bring clarity, capacity, and confidence, empowering courageous leadership to reimagine the future of higher education. Today, it's just me, all by my lonesome. I get you all to myself. I'm going to introduce my friend, Jackson. Jackson Tidwell. Jackson, tell me a little bit about yourself. Just tell our listener out there.
Absolutely. Well, good afternoon, Neil. Happy Monday. Delighted to be with you, my friend. My name is Jackson Tidwell. I serve as the Director of Student Conduct and Community Standards at UT San Antonio. Previously, I worked in Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana in student activities, fraternity and sorority life, and alumni relations. And super delighted to be here to talk student affairs with you, my friend.
Is there anything you didn't do?
I didn't do I had residence life, so all my housing professionals out there, I assisted with some fraternity and sorority housing, but I my main goal and my main responsibility has never been residence life, so I've not done that yet.
Okay. Well, as long as you have a complex about it, then I'm happy. So,
I know
so
it's a tough job, so I respect.
I always say if you can do residence life, you can do anything. So you're pretty great though. Uh, Tell me your story, man.
Absolutely. Well, my story takes place, which it's crazy how much time flies, almost 6 years ago, but it's going to take place in 2020. So I was working at an institution, a wonderful institution in South Louisiana. And Neil, do you know anything about what happens in South Louisiana between the months of July to about October?
Huh. I think
I'm
living
not
in
talking about
Galveston,
Mardi
I have an
Gras.
idea.
What
Yeah.
do you
Yeah.
think?
It's everybody's favorite season,
Yep.
hurricane season.
Hurricane season, absolutely. Well, I was living in Tornado Alley, Oklahoma in 2020, made my way down to South Louisiana, where I worked in fraternity and sorority life and student activities. And during hurricane season, the university that I was working at has policies, hurricane plans, phase one, phase two,
Mhm.
phase three. And the title of my story is Policies Have Purpose. I know as student affairs professionals, we've always been spaces of, where's the policy for that? People want to argue the policy, and I have a strong belief that policies are always grounded in purpose, that we're not just going to have an arbitrary policy, that there always is going to be a reason, some depth to a policy. And it really resonates with me back in 2020. In August, Hurricane Laura rolled into South Louisiana, and immediately the university went into the phase three of the hurricane plan. And in phase three of the hurricane plan, one of my roles was to walk door to door, knock on fraternity houses, and tell their residents to evacuate. Well, Neil, you could guess that wasn't really well received. I heard a lot of arguing, a lot of it's my right to be here. I pay rent. You're not a member. You can't tell me, sovereign citizen, those things. But I reminded them of the policy, and due to their health and safety, they needed to evacuate the premises. And that was important because on the property where all the fraternity houses are located, there were these gigantic water oaks. And if you know anything about water oaks,
Yeah.
during hurricane season, they're they're prone to fall. Well, I went door to door, had a lot of arguing. A lot of people didn't want to um, comply, but ultimately they did once they realized conduct could get involved and that they needed to, they did not need to fail to comply to the university directive.
So hold on a second. So you're going up and you're saying there's a
Knock,
hurricane.
knock. I would say they're all aware there's a hurricane, but we've entered our phase three. You need to evacuate the fraternity house. You need to go to another place.
And they're fighting you on this.
Correct. Because they don't want to drive to where they're from. They don't want to go off campus. They might a lot of them had jobs and they're working in the city, so like they didn't want to leave. They wanted to stay. And they're in college. They're having a great time. They don't want to go back home on that
They got a
weekend.
hurricane. Yeah.
Yeah.
School's out. That's a hurricane. That's
So
right.
yeah, door to door doing that. Well, thankfully, everybody complied. I had an outstanding dean of students and an outstanding associate dean of students that really supported me in that experience. And ultimately, um, later on that the next day, when the hurricane rolled through, some water oaks split, and a giant water oak fell right down the middle of the one of the second fraternity house on the row. Six people lived in the house at the time, and no one was in the house because it evacuated and went right down the living quarters. So definitely could have been a loss of life, severe injury. To this day, the house has still not been rebuilt.
Oh.
So I go back to that moment. It wasn't fun. I didn't thoroughly enjoy it. They might not have seen the importance at the time, but anytime I'm arguing or, in conduct now, we base our daily conversations off the policies that we have. We want to do it in an educational format, but it's all about our policies and procedures. I think of that story and that all of our policies, it has some sort of purpose to mitigate risk or some sort of purpose to improve the learning environment for our students. And I think about South Louisiana and that hurricane. And if someone tells me, I'm a rule follower naturally, Neil, but if someone tells me there's a policy for that, we need to do this, you know what? I'm following the policy because I know that whoever created it, they there's a reason to it.
I mean, I'll follow. I like to think that I'm a rule follower too, but I will follow any rule unless it's dumb. And then I was always that guy who wanted to argue. Well,
Yeah.
why? Why? This is stupid.
My dad's a judge, so I'll kind of I kind of grew up in a household where the rule is the rule, settled law.
So I have to know, did you talk to these guys after they returned
I
or?
mean, I had a couple just tell me like, hey, like we understand we understand the risk, but like the thing is I was there for 4.5 years after
Mhm.
that, and we had other hurricanes, and there were other times we would have to evacuate, and we never had,
Never.
we didn't have problems again. I mean, I remember one time I went to a house and they were starting, they were kind of upset, and I literally just turned and pointed to the empty lot of where that fraternity house that was destroyed, where it was located, and they're like, okay, yeah, fair enough.
It's funny because in this line of work, we do get a fair amount of, man, this would be a perfect I told you so moment. Like, you know, mess around, finding out. And like it's really, really hard sometimes to not just be like, I mean,
I mean, I would say in the moment, I was like, yeah, I did what I was supposed to do, but also there was a sense of happiness in that you could see that there was, we always say that our work is grounded in learning outside of the classroom. And there was a sense of, I think some students, not everybody, they've never admit it, but a lot of them, I think, learned from the experience.
yeah.
And I think they're more willing to, listen to the guidance of people that are working to support their educational experience.
So you never talked to the guys about, I mean, it never came up or like, aren't you glad you listened to me?
No, because I mean it was completely destroyed and they had a lot going on. And I think the other fraternities sympathized, like, oh my gosh, yeah. And
Yeah.
I would just say, yeah, that's why our policies exist. That's why we had to evacuate due to those water oaks on the premises. But there was
Yeah.
never like I can't remember. Yeah, I've slept since then, but I can't remember if there was a sole conversation with the fraternity um, that it happened to.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of hard to, you know,
But I do remember that time. all of them had members that didn't want to comply. All of them ended up complying, but it wasn't just them, but they were the ones that it happened to.
Well, I remember hurricane. It was Hurricane Laura, right?
Hurricane Laura.
It was a hurricane in a pandemic. And our processes are like if we believe that there's even a realistic chance it's gonna make landfall here, we hightail it up to College Station. And
Smart.
I remember watching this because it's serious. Putting putting them on the road, like doing an evacuation, is a decision as well, right? Because you don't want to put all of your students on the road. Anytime you do, there's danger. So when we did that, uh, that was I remember it was really hard for us because we were right on the cone, the 2/3 probability cone.
Yeah.
And then we ended up doing all of it and then got nothing because it doglegged back to Louisiana. So where were you? Like, where did you pull up?
During the hurricane.
Yeah.
I that one specifically, I went to my parents' house in East Texas. So
Okay.
I evacuated, and that was my first one, and it was COVID. I was like, I don't got time for this. So I was like, get me out of there.
So Jackson, I mean, you and I have been friends for a minute and you have a billion stories. Why'd you pick that one?
I think for where I am in my life now, leading an office of student conduct, I think that I have reflected when people ask about kind of monumental times in my uh, car career thus far, like moments I go back to, teachable moments. That one comes up, and it's a little different. I mean, I have a lot. I agree with you. I have a lot of stories, as do many people that have worked in student affairs more than 6 months. Um, but that one, I think of just how kind of unique it is, but also how it's grounded in what we want best for our students. We want our
Right.
students to learn, you know, um, responsibility. We want them to learn the importance of physical well-being. And I really kind of go back to that conversation with those students and relate it to my work that I'm doing presently. Thankfully, San Antonio doesn't have a hurricane problem, but
Um,
you know, you know,
Give it some time. Yeah.
yeah, give it some time. You never know. 2026 might be a little different.
I mean, you make a really good point about like policies have a purpose. Um, and like we follow these policies, because they all should, they have a reason, but not all policies are equal. So, how do you deal with where maybe you're not all in on the policy, or maybe you don't really understand completely the why behind the policy?
Once again, I'm a rule follower. So typically, if you're asking me, Neil, you're not asking just like to the universe. I would say for me, um, I'm always going to follow the policy just because I believe policy should be written in the chance of there's purpose behind them and that they're there to mitigate risk potentially. Um,
Yeah.
but I do think you don't want to over duplicate the efforts of, I think people also have a problem with policies because they get lost in the sauce. It's just like all these things. And a lot of times policies will negate one another or that they'll not be, there's not a lot of clarity. And you feel like you can't enforce it. Thankfully, with a lot of the policies I've encountered, we were able to enforce. So, like a policy right now that I think's kind of a hot topic is like what universities are doing with AI.
Okay.
There's so much we don't know, and we have a policy that AI is considered cheating or unauthorized assistance, but there's not a lot. We have a broad policy in our code of student conduct, but a lot of universities are kind of struggling with creating policy in areas especially where we don't know enough. We're still learning. It's such an evolving
So
topic.
if you don't know, how do you when you're at their front door and they're trying to, they've watched every episode of Law and Order.
Oh
So
yeah. They're getting you.
Oh,
They're Olivia Benson, yeah, real
yeah, Uncle Larry, the real estate lawyer, is on speaker phone, and
yeah, for sure.
uh,
Somebody's dad's a lawyer.
yeah, and so you're trying. I mean, to me, I think it's the most appropriate, and honestly, I kind of worry about students that don't ever question.
Yeah.
Sometimes, like if you don't understand, you should ask, and it's my job to be able to articulate that to you. So, you know, things like that where you don't really know, like you know, how do you defend it with your whole chest? Like you kind of have to sometimes.
Well, I'll respond two things to that. One, prior to higher education, I worked customer service for 2 years. I can handle hospitality, getting, yelled at pretty explicitly. So that really kind of grounded my perspective. And then the next thing is I would agree with you. I don't have a problem being questioned because I do believe that as administrators, it is our responsibility, explaining policy, that's teachable moments for our students. I think the disrespectful arguing and the, not putting their putting their foot down and like not coming to terms with it, that is, I think, when it crosses the line. But I had no problem with people saying, well, like, why do we need to do this? What is the importance? What can we do? Where is the policy, et cetera? Because I do think, even though I am a rule follower and I follow policies, I'm not that kind of like person where it's like, oh, we have a policy for this, and then like I don't even look at the policy. Like I want to at least read and
Yeah.
understand what I'm being held to. So like I'm not one of those like, oh, someone can say, oh, we have a policy for that, and that policy never existed. Like that's not me. I'm gonna read the policy and see. But if there is a policy, I'm most likely going to follow it.
Well, I mean, sometimes following the policy, I don't know, I wish we could get like a nickel for every time we've said the word policy today, but
Probably,
following one of those, um, sometimes it's about just being consistent. Like the second you bring into question this one versus that one, uh, you're kind of cooked. Like you can't say that, you know, well, you made the exception for that person over here with that rule. So the
yeah.
rule doesn't really, I mean,
You
you
can't
have discretion.
policies can't live in a world. I mean, I think student affairs in higher ed, but there's a lot of gray. But I think when it comes to like the policy, like you have like they can be broad where you can put, but I think when you're enforcing that policy, it's got to try to be black as white as possible because that's where you get into problems.
Yeah. Ugh. Yeah. I think there's places where like your discretion needs to speak a little bit, or maybe not. I don't know. So, okay. So, you talk about the story and you chose a story because you feel like it's relevant. So, what what is something that, you know, today Jackson would tell 6 years ago Jackson? Like, what would you do differently?
Oh man. Um, that's a great question.
I know.
Good, yeah, good job with that one. Um, I would say one. I feel like 6 years ago, Jackson put a lot of pressure on himself,
Hmm.
and I would think, and I took a lot of things personally,
Yeah.
and I would tell 6 year ago Jackson to just do your best, be yourself, represent your values, and don't take things personally.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, I think that kind of advice is pretty evergreen, right?
And that I think I can sometimes if I'm not intentionally working on that, like I can still take things personally, but I mean, if you worked in conduct more than a year, you'll know that you can't. Um, so that I think is something that I would go tell myself.
So, okay, apply that to like conduct right now. Conduct is so important. And honestly, I think it's my favorite part of my job. Um, my mom was an educator for 40 years, and
Mhm.
when I told her I was getting into the business, she said to watch
No.
out, watch out. Yeah, she said, "Are you sure?" No, she told me to watch out for the ones that give me the most guff because they're going to end up being my favorite. And I mean, honestly, that for the most part is held to be completely true. Um, but like, how does that advice hold up now? Like, how do you put that into work every day?
Well, my role's a little different in that, like, I am the director, so I'm triaging a lot of the cases. So, like, I'll meet
Yeah.
with students, but I'm not the lead caseworker on the cases. Um, so I think that. I mean, I do agree with your insight of like sometimes the tough cookies end up being the memories you come back to because you could really see like a transformational change in
Mhm.
in their life due to the efforts of your staff and what they were able to do for the student. And ultimately, um, thing about conduct is, yes, we hold students accountable, but like we want to retain our students. We want our students to graduate. If there ever is a suspension on the table, we want them to come back and graduate from our institution and support them. We're
Yeah.
just trying to be consistent and turn that behavior into a teachable moment.
I mean, consistency is clear and clear is kind, you
Yeah.
know, like I don't really ever blame a student too much for not knowing something. There's no way they should have really known. Like we just had a case come in for self-plagiarism. The student took a class, failed the class the first, no, we had to withdraw from the class the first time, and then got the exact same assignment. And so they turned in the same assignment they did last time. They just updated the date and everything. And so, those kill me because how would you know? Like, I don't know how I would expect a student to just understand that, like, you can plagiarize yourself, right?
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes for me, you know, the work is in showing a little bit of grace if you can, and and kind of getting down into the situation with them and trying to help them see it. But like in those types of circumstances, I think grace can go a really, really long way. And then in others, no, they knew better. Like they knew better.
I'm loving this chat. Man, I hope I get to come back. Deep chat with Neil. This is
I
awesome.
mean, you just need another hurricane in
Okay, yeah,
San
for sure.
Antonio.
I'll find some story.
That would be a story. So, um, I guess my last question is just, you know, um, what is it that you hope that other people are going to take from this?
Two things. One, I think I would want if anybody is struggling in writing policy or enforcing policy and feel like kind of it's a lost cause or like a lose-lose that you can't really kind of push the needle and move it, I would just and use this to encourage them to go on. I didn't write these policies. They were already created when I was hired at the institution, but I was required to enforce them. And I think at first there was a lot of intimidation or like, is this like, what is the point of this? Even when people are arguing that with you, you even start to second guess yourself. So I
Right,
think if people are in the policy game, enforcing the policies that their institution holds, just keep strong. Make sure you know it because students will try to recite it back, but just make sure you know it. And then ultimately, second thing is, and I'm repeating myself, is make it a teachable moment for the students. Don't make it you need to do this because you're required to do this. Let them know the why. As you know, I can think of how many student affairs at student affairs conferences right now, how many presentations are focused on this generation of students. They want to
right.
know the why. And
Yeah,
I can see that every day when we're working with our students here in conduct of like they want to know why. Like why is that a code of conduct violation? Why can't they do that? And I think that having a stance of educating the policy and educating the purpose behind the policy is what's really going to kind of drive that change.
I know I said that was my last question, but I lied. How do how do you deal with policy? And I mean, I'm not saying that this is especially, you know, applicable to these days. Um, but how do you deal with the policy that you don't agree with?
Well, I'll I'm gonna kind of segue. I'm gonna take that question. I'm gonna kind of segue with it.
Okay.
I got the opportunity, and this is gonna be a shameless plug, but I'm gonna do it. I got the opportunity to go to the NASPA Region 3 Mid Managers Institute last year in
Mhm.
Knoxville, Tennessee. They did an outstanding job hosting us. Shout out to my group facilitator, Dr. Angela Taylor at University of Louisville. But it was such an outstanding experience. And Dr. Nicole Lewis gave a talk, and I believe she did this with Dr. Angela Taylor, but they were talking about how as you rise up in leadership positions, the mission and the values and the job description of the supervisor above you, like you're representative of that. So when it comes to I think of that about so many times that I might not have agreed with a decision coming from the VP or dean of students, or maybe I don't understand it, but accepting that this is a part of their vision and this is something that they want to do. And ultimately, my job is to make sure that it gets done at my level or below. So when it
Yeah.
comes to policy, that is kind of, I think back to their talk and how you represent above you, regardless of your opinion on that. So whatever policy they're pushing up above, you're representative of that. Obviously, I'm not saying if it's again, like this is not arguing. This is saying in the work setting. I'm not saying,
Right.
people can have differences, but when it comes to the work and what they're setting forth of their purpose of their division of student affairs, you're representative of the people above you.
And I guess it's just about like controlling what you can control, right?
Yep.
Like you can't necessarily control this rule or that rule,
Yeah,
but
and another thing I want to add, sorry, put my
oh
thing
yeah.
up. I was like, boom, boom. Um, I think what's important when you're in those spaces of even if you disagree, you don't go to areas you're supervising and then be like, well, I don't agree with this, but this is what we're gonna do because that creates like an
Oh yeah.
us versus them complex. So it's really important to, you know, to take your opinion out of it and whatever's being decided that you're going to pass down, keep that very neutral. Because I would tell 6 years, there were times 6 years ago where I did that. And I think
Yeah.
other people did that. And I put my own, because I took things personally, I put my own, invest my own personal time and opinions into things when really it shouldn't have been that way. It was, this is the policy, this is what's being directed of me. I need to do it.
Yeah. I've had students make such tremendously good points that I feel like just been punched in the nose. Like it just like what just happened? Because
Mhm.
they make such really good points, and I always tell them, if I can't defend the rule, then I promise to work with you to change it. Because that's empowering, and honestly, like we're all in this together, and you want to see students defend something, give them something to have ownership in, and that's a skill they take with them forever, right?
Yep.
Ah,
Great.
well, speaking of speaking of skills you take with you forever, I want to thank our sponsors, Evolve. Higher education needs courageous leadership now more than ever, and poor leadership has never been more costly. At Evolve Institute, we are empowering leaders with the capacity to turn challenges into possibilities and lead with and through them with clarity, confidence, and courage. We offer leadership coaching journeys for leadership teams and individual leaders. Visit evolveinstitute.com to learn more. Jackson, I always feel so lucky when I get to spend a little bit of time with you.
The feeling's mutual, Neil. The feeling is totally mutual. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, is anybody who ever gets a chance to meet Jackson, Like, do yourself a favor because
Golly, man, you need
uh
to tell my wife this.
yeah. Well, my mom's the one listening right now, so
Okay, yeah.
you
Hey,
might get a
shout out
text.
Neil's mom. Yeah. I love people. If anybody's listening to this, I love to connect with student affairs professionals. I'm a woo positivity, includer, belief, connectedness. So,
We have like three of the same
yeah,
values.
I would love to connect with people doing the work. Keep
Well,
on keeping on.
how can people connect with you?
They can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm currently on a social media cleanse, so it can't do that. But connect me on LinkedIn, Jackson Tidwell, or shoot me an email at jackson.tidwell@utsa.edu. I'd love to connect.
Yeah, we'll make sure your information is in the notes for this episode
Absolutely.
too.
Absolutely. Well, this was good for the soul, Neil.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. This has been Here's the Story, part of the Student Affairs Now family. We're so glad you joined us to laugh, cry, learn, sometimes commiserate, but always celebrate being a part of the Student Affairs experience. If you have a story, and we all have a story, please consider sharing with us by leaving a 2-minute pitch by a voice file at studentaffairsnow.com/here's the story. Every story is welcome and every earnest perspective is worthy. And even if you don't feel like sharing yours, you can still find ours and others at studentaffairsnow.com. You can find us on YouTube. Please smash that subscribe button and anywhere you listen to podcasts. This episode has been edited by Nat Ambrosi. Nat, you're the best. Thank you for making us sound better than we have any business sounding. We hope this has fed your flame a little bit, everybody, because your light matters. Keep using it to make the world a brighter place. And until next time, this has been Here's a Story. Bye.